Alice sat in the luxurious dining room of Bella's house. The light streaming through the large window made everything around her glow. The laughter and chatter of the family echoed through the cozy space. But Alice couldn't fully immerse herself in the atmosphere. She felt an odd feeling enveloping this monthly family brunch, an inexplicable sensation that lingered in her heart. Everything seemed normal, but Alice couldn't shake the feeling of unease rising within her. Her husband Mark sat across from her with his usual smile, but today, that smile gave Alice an unusual feeling. They had been married for 3 years, and Alice knew Mark's every habit. He had always been thoughtful and attentive, but today, something had changed. Mark handed her a cup of coffee, saying it was a new type he had just tried. Alice looked into the cup, noticing the steam rising and the strange aroma. Yes, the taste of this coffee was unlike anything she had ever tasted before. It was strangely sweet, but there was something off about it, a faint odor she couldn't explain. Alice felt something wasn't right, but she didn't say anything, just slowly took a small sip, trying not to show her suspicion. But as soon as she swallowed, she felt a slight burn in her throat, a discomfort she couldn't explain. She glanced at Mark, and the sense of unease surged again. Why had he given her this cup of coffee? Why did it taste so strange? She started to feel suspicious, and that suspicion felt like shadows closing in around her, making it hard for her to relax. Alice turned her attention to Bella, her sister-in-law, sitting nearby, chatting happily with the others in the family. But there was something odd in Bella's eyes. She was looking at Alice, but not with the familiar warmth she usually had. There was something sneaky, something unspoken in that gaze. Bella's eyes seemed to hold a secret, and it was something Alice couldn't ignore. She began to feel that the suspicion wasn't just coming from Mark, but also from Bella. Was her sister-in-law hiding something? Was there some ill intention behind it all? Alice tried to remain calm, but she couldn't deny the strange change in their behavior. The furtive glances, the sly smiles, and the vague feeling of unease surrounded her, making it hard to shake off. The conversation around the table couldn't distract her. Alice realized she was no longer the center of the conversation. Everyone seemed to be avoiding her gaze, trying to talk among themselves without including her. She didn't know what to do, just knowing that something wasn't right, that there was some kind of calculation she couldn't understand. The vague fear suddenly overwhelmed Alice, making her wonder if everything was truly as normal as it seemed. Were Mark and Bella hiding something from her? Were they trying to harm her in a subtle way, one she couldn't immediately detect? These questions swirled in her mind, preventing her from focusing on what was going on. She began to feel the loneliness in her own home. Would anyone stand up for her if things got worse? Despite the growing anxiety, Alice tried to stay calm and kept quiet. She didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to complicate things further, but this feeling wasn't easily brushed off. Inside her, suspicion was rising, and she couldn't ignore the sense that something was being hidden from her. A truth she couldn't yet see, but could feel. From that moment, Alice began to wonder, was she being manipulated, or was her safety truly protected in this house? These were unanswered questions, these vague signs that Alice couldn't ignore. She felt the unease in her own family, and the secrets of Mark and Bella slowly started to emerge in her mind. Would she have the courage to face this truth, or would she have to live forever in suspicion and endless worry? Only time could answer that question, but one thing was certain. Alice could never return to her peaceful life before. Everything had changed, and she knew she would have to fight to uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. She had lived in a world where everything seemed perfect, or at least, she wanted to believe that everything was just like that. She and Mark, her husband, had been married for 3 years, filled with memories and happy moments. They were the couple that everyone in the family and among friends admired, and Alice always took pride in her choice. Mark, a smart and thoughtful man, always made her feel safe. But the strange incidents that she started to experience gradually ignited a flame of doubt in her heart that she couldn't put out. At first, these incidents were things Alice thought were mere coincidences. But over time, these coincidences became increasingly strange. Every time she visited Bella, her sister-in-law's house, she felt that something was wrong. The meals at their house always ended with an odd sense of fatigue, nausea, and there was even a time when she suffered from food poisoning. She never suspected anything until the incidents repeated in a worrying pattern. And each time, Mark would come up with a reasonable explanation. He would tell her it was just an accident, a carelessness in the meal that anyone could encounter. But Alice couldn't shake off the growing worry and doubt in her heart. This feeling didn't just stop at food-related incidents. There were nights, when they were together, that Alice noticed a difference in Mark's behavior. He didn't spend as much time with her as before. The evenings when he worked late or came home late made Alice feel lonely, and whenever she asked about his work, he would always avoid the topic or only give a shallow answer. This made her feel that something was wrong, as if he were hiding something important. Especially when she looked into his eyes, she noticed a difference. It wasn't the concern or care she was used to, but rather a lack of something, a void in their relationship that she couldn't explain. One night, after having dinner with Mark and Bella at her sister-in-law's house, Alice once again felt dizzy, nauseous, and drained. This time, the sensation lasted longer, making her worry more than ever. Mark was by her side, gently comforting her, telling her it was just a small incident, and advising her to rest. But Alice couldn't deny that a deep suspicion was starting to grow inside her. She couldn't imagine that Mark could harm her, but the change in his attitude, the avoidance, and the lack of care could not help but make her feel uneasy. Alice wasn't the type of woman who usually worried, but these strange occurrences were making her unable to not think. She began to remember all the previous times when Mark often advised her not to eat this or that, telling her those things didn't suit her taste, or that they wouldn't be good for her health. And now, the continuous incidents of food poisoning, even with Mark's reasonable explanations, could not extinguish the worry within her. She felt as if something dark that she couldn't see but could feel, was slowly suffocating her sense of safety. The more she thought about it, the more Alice felt her relationship with Mark was being threatened by factors she couldn't control. The brief conversations she had with Bella also made her feel unclear. Bella still acted like a lovely sister-in-law, but sometimes the furtive glances exchanged between her and Mark, the ambiguous smiles, and their private conversations made Alice unable to avoid suspecting that there was some kind of connection between them that she didn't know about. Could it be that Bella was also hiding something? Something that made her feel as if she was standing in the middle of an invisible danger? This situation became more and more apparent when Alice discovered strange messages on Mark's phone. The late-night messages, the ambiguous words exchanged between him and Bella, made her even more anxious. It couldn't just be another coincidence. Alice couldn't continue living in this uncertainty. She decided she would have to face her doubts and find out the truth, even if that truth could be an unimaginable shock. The nights Alice spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the growing doubts in her mind, made her realize that her worry was not unfounded. The incidents she had encountered were not just random. They could be part of a plan, a scheme she couldn't see yet. No matter how hard she tried to convince herself that it was all just coincidence, the unease in her heart couldn't be extinguished. She had to find out the truth. And if the truth behind these incidents was what she feared, she would have to face it, no matter how painful it might be. Alice could no longer live in this uncertainty. She couldn't let it haunt her forever. The worry she felt now was no longer just a personal emotion, but a sign of deep insecurity, a warning from within herself. She had to find a way to investigate, to confront the truth, and free herself from these doubts, not only to protect herself, but also to protect her family. Could these incidents be the result of a dark calculation? Could she overcome these challenges? And could the love she had for Mark survive the betrayal? If the truth was something she couldn't imagine, Alice could no longer live in a state of unease. The vague feelings, the inexplicable doubts that she had been suppressing for so long were growing stronger, to the point where she could no longer ignore them. She decided that she had to do something, had to face the truth, even if that truth would shake the very world she was living in. She no longer wanted to live in worry, no longer wanted to shut herself off from those feelings. Once again, when she sat next to Mark and Bella, the atmosphere around them became heavy, as if something was hanging in the air waiting to fall. The changes in Mark's behavior only made Alice more anxious. Over the past 3 years, she had always felt the care and attention of her husband, but recently he had started to change. He no longer spent as much time with her as before. The late nights at work, the long phone calls with no clear explanation, made it impossible for her not to doubt. She began to realize that something was wrong, that he was no longer the man she had once trusted completely. And Bella, her sister-in-law, did nothing to ease Alice's anxiety. On the contrary, Bella's presence in the family made Alice feel more tense than ever. One day, after seeing her husband spend more and more time at Bella's house, Alice couldn't help but feel curious. He said he was planning a surprise gift for their anniversary, but when Alice asked for more details, he avoided the topic. This only made Alice feel abandoned and lonely. She didn't want to doubt her husband, but the changes in his attitude and the increasing number of absences left her uneasy. With these unsettling feelings in her heart, Alice decided to confront her sister-in-law Bella. Once again, she couldn't stop wondering about the relationship between Bella and Mark, and the emotional neglect she was feeling only heightened her anxiety. Although Bella had always been friendly and charming, Alice couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on that she couldn't see. Bella seemed to ignore the changes in Mark's behavior, or perhaps she was hiding something. Alice couldn't explain this feeling, but something deep inside her told her to be more cautious. Thus, Alice decided to have a private conversation with Bella. She didn't want to make things more tense, but her heart couldn't be at peace while the suspicions kept growing. The conversation took place in a somewhat cold atmosphere. Bella acted as if everything was normal, but her evasive gaze made Alice feel that something was off. Bella's answers didn't reassure her either. It seemed as though Bella was trying to smooth things over, but her vague replies only fueled Alice's doubts. Why was Bella intentionally avoiding simple questions? Alice couldn't ignore this abnormality. The conversation ended without providing Alice with any reassurance. She didn't get a clear answer from Bella, but there was a vague feeling inside her that something was being hidden. She left the meeting with a heavy heart, unable to determine whether she was worrying too much. But the feeling of unease still lingered. The furtive glances between Bella and Mark, the unclear words exchanged in their conversations, all created a picture that Alice couldn't yet piece together. The suspicion inside Alice only grew stronger. She began to feel like she was no longer an important part of Mark's life. The nights when he wasn't by her side, the appointments she wasn't included in, all seemed to be pushing her away from his life. She couldn't help but think that there was something Mark was hiding from her. Did he truly love her? Or had he fallen out of love? These questions kept gnawing at her mind, unable to be released. But Alice didn't stop at personal worry. She began to secretly observe her husband, quietly and discreetly. She wanted to uncover the truth, even if it was something she didn't want to face. One day, when Mark left his phone with the screen on, Alice couldn't resist. She picked it up and started scrolling through his messages. The messages between him and Bella were baffling. The ambiguous conversations, the affectionate words that seemed too intimate, made Alice's heart tighten. She couldn't deny that something was wrong. Was all this just a coincidence? Alice could no longer stay silent. The secret conversations between Mark and Bella had left her with a feeling she couldn't describe, as if the whole world was collapsing. She could no longer ignore it, but she didn't know what to do. She could only continue observing, hoping that these suspicions were just nightmares in her mind. However, a part of Alice knew that she had probably started down a path that she couldn't turn back from. a path where she could no longer deny these feelings. The suspicion became clearer and clearer. Alice couldn't continue living in the chaos of these thoughts. She needed to face the truth, even if it was something she didn't want to believe. She couldn't sit idly by in worry and unease anymore. She had to find answers, and although she knew this would change everything, she couldn't turn back. She could only continue her journey to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing painful realities she could hardly bear. Everything felt like a strange dream, a dream that Alice could not wake up from. After deciding to swap coffee cups with Bella, everything quickly became unclear. Just a minute after drinking, Bella started to show strange symptoms. At first, Alice thought it was just normal tiredness, but then she saw her sister-in-law trembling uncontrollably. Bella tripped over a chair and had to grab the table to keep her balance. Before Alice could understand what was happening, she saw Bella collapse, her body unable to stand, her hands limp and dangling. In a dazed moment, Alice realized something was wrong. She immediately rushed to Bella, but her sister-in-law had already passed out before she could catch her. Alice felt a wave of panic rise within her, filled with worry and fear. Why had Bella fallen like that? She wasn't sick. There were no signs of fatigue before. Alice felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Something deep and dark was gradually unfolding. Alice's mind became chaotic. She hurriedly checked her surroundings, searching for a rational explanation. But everything was too vague, too inexplicable. She saw Mark standing not far away, his eyes wide with panic. He ran over to Bella, bent down, said nothing but looked at her with a fearful expression. However, when Alice turned back to look at Mark, there was something in his gaze that sent chills down her spine. It wasn't the look of a husband worried about his wife. It was the look of someone hiding a dark truth. The fear began to spread within Alice. She felt like she couldn't stand still any longer. Suddenly, a thought flashed in her mind. Could it be that she had been poisoned? She couldn't believe what she was thinking, but the panic in her heart made it undeniable. Everything started to become blurry, and in this moment, a faint light flickered in her mind. The truth she had long suspected, the truth she had always tried to ignore. She ran quickly into the living room where her phone was on the table. Alice couldn't wait any longer. She secretly began recording a video of what was happening. In the video, she clearly saw Mark bending down beside Bella, mumbling something indistinct while nervously looking around. Suddenly, when he turned to look, Alice saw something strange in his eyes, a fear he couldn't hide. Alice knew this was the moment when the truth would be revealed. She couldn't wait any longer. She couldn't let herself be hidden in lies anymore. Alice continued to record the scene, not just to prove the truth, but also to protect herself. Only moments later, Mark saw Alice and seemed unable to bear it anymore. He lowered his head. His shoulders slumped under the weight of the truth. "Alice," he started, his voice low and full of guilt. "You figured it out, haven't you?" Alice felt her heart tighten as she heard those words. She didn't want to hear them, but she had to. "Yes, we planned to ruin your reputation, both at work and in front of others. Everything was just for Bella. She wanted to replace you, wanted everything you have, even your position in the company," Mark confessed, his voice trembling. Alice couldn't believe what she was hearing. She couldn't believe that the man she loved could betray her like this. Her mind spun, unable to understand why everything was happening this way. She had always thought she understood Mark, that their love was strong enough to overcome any obstacle. But now, she saw clearly that all of that was a lie. Mark and Bella had been plotting for a long time, using her love and trust as pawns in a game she had never been invited to play. Alice felt like she was under attack from every direction. Her emotions, anger, pain, hurt, flooded toward her. She could hardly breathe. Everything inside her was shattering, but Alice knew she couldn't collapse. She couldn't let these traitors control her life. She couldn't allow Mark and Bella to continue like this. They had thought she would never discover their plan, but now the truth had been exposed, and Alice would never let them escape responsibility. A mixture of pain and strength surged within her. Alice looked at Mark, her eyes filled with determination. "I won't let you and her keep destroying my life," she said firmly. Mark looked at her, his eyes full of fear, but he could no longer justify himself. It was too late to undo it all. She didn't need his forgiveness, nor any explanation. Alice turned back to the phone, her emotions still raw. But she knew that now she had to stand up, fight for justice, and for herself. Mark and Bella's plan had been exposed, and Alice, though in pain, had made up her mind not to let this betrayal go without consequences. She had gathered enough evidence, and now it was time to put an end to it all, so no one could continue to exploit and harm her again. Alice felt as if her footsteps were burdened, as if each movement had to bear an invisible weight. After everything had been exposed, the truth gradually crept out from the small cracks in her life, cracks she had once trusted. Now, Alice no longer felt like a happy wife. She no longer felt like a part of a complete family. Everything crumbled before her eyes, and she began to face a reality that she could not accept. Her relationship with Mark and Bella was no longer a bond of love and trust. It was now a noose tightening around her neck, suffocating her. In the past, when she was absorbed in the tranquility of her family life, Alice couldn't see the warning signs. Now that everything was clear, she couldn't help but question herself. How could she have ignored the explanations Mark gave her? How could she have overlooked the consecutive food poisonings without suspecting anything? The conversations with Bella, the furtive glances between them, all of these could have helped her see the truth sooner. But no, she hadn't wanted to look at them. She hadn't wanted to face the painful truths about her closest loved ones. Now, with everything exposed, she had to face the torment and self-blame. Was her anxiety really a form of protection for herself? Or was it just a defensive reaction of her soul when confronted with too much pain? How could she trust the people she had once loved with all her heart? Each step, each thought now drowned in doubt and tension, making everything feel vague and dangerous. Alice clearly felt that this was a battle not just against the outside world, but also against herself. She not only had to uncover the truth about Mark and Bella's plot, but she also had to confront the conflicting emotions within her. She loved Mark, but he was the one who betrayed her. She trusted Bella, but she was the one who assisted in this plot. Could her trust ever be restored? Could she continue living a peaceful life if she couldn't forgive them? The conflict between logic and emotion was something Alice could not avoid. Her mind told her to stay calm, to clarify everything, so she wouldn't be dragged into the spiral of betrayal. But her emotions pulled her back to the beautiful memories, the happy moments when she and Mark were still the perfect couple. That feeling, although very strong, now only made her heart heavier. She wanted to forget, to leave everything behind and find peace again. But how could she forget when the very people she loved most had pushed her into this situation? It was an unrelenting battle within Alice's soul. Each day that passed, she had to confront the contradictory emotions, the tug of war between protecting what she had once trusted and facing the harsh reality. She couldn't ignore what had happened, but she also couldn't let these emotions continue to dominate her life. She knew that the truth was the only thing that could free her from this pain. But would she have the strength to continue searching for the truth? Or would she be dragged down by those feelings of betrayal? Alice began to continue her investigation, each step heavier and slower than before. She searched for every piece of evidence that could prove her suspicions were right. She went through the conversations between Mark and Bella, reread every message she had found on Mark's phone. The unclear messages, the late-night calls, all made her feel like she was being watched, monitored by the very people she had once trusted the most. Every time she discovered a new detail, her heart ached. She didn't know what to do with this evidence, how to confront these truths. Once again, Alice felt like a pawn in the hands of others. Every conversation, every meeting with Mark and Bella brought Alice a feeling like walking on a tightrope. She couldn't find safety anywhere, as each time something new was discovered, another secret was revealed. She could see the fear in Mark's eyes every time she asked a question, the defenses he couldn't hide. As for Bella, she was too calm, too composed, as if nothing had changed, as if she had already prepared for what was to come. Meanwhile, Alice's thoughts intertwined between logic and emotion. She wanted to stay strong, to find the truth, without letting her emotions control her. But the more she searched, the deeper she delved into the truth, the more she felt herself being torn between logic and feelings. She couldn't separate herself from the past. She couldn't easily let go of the feelings she had once had for Mark and Bella. But this betrayal couldn't just be left alone. It needed to be resolved, and Alice knew that she had to face it, no matter how painful it might be. Now was the time for Alice to make a choice. Would she protect her family, or would she stand up against the very people she had once loved the most? She couldn't easily forgive this betrayal, but she also couldn't live in that pain forever. Her life was no longer about happy days, but rather an ongoing battle to protect her own safety and maintain her self-respect. Could she find the truth and face it with strength, or would she be forever trapped in these conflicting emotions? Alice couldn't escape these thoughts, but she knew that each step she took in this journey would bring her closer to freedom. The struggle within her wasn't just a battle with Mark and Bella. It was a battle with herself, with the feelings she had once held for them. She didn't know what the outcome would be, but one thing was certain. She would not let herself be pushed out of her own life so easily. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. She stood frozen in the hospital, amidst the chaos, pain, and overwhelming fear. What Bella had just revealed was like a bomb exploding in her head, shattering everything Alice had once trusted. Everything inside her seemed to collapse. No longer the truth she had known, but now a life filled with lies, schemes, and betrayal. In the empty hospital room, where only the beeping machines and Bella's faint breathing could be heard, Alice still hadn't regained her composure. She stared at her sister-in-law, who she had always seen as an irreplaceable part of the family. And now, that very person had become the enemy she could never have imagined. Bella's eyes, when facing Alice, no longer held innocence, no longer the warmth of family. Instead, they were cold and filled with a recognition Alice couldn't ignore. Bella began to speak, her voice trembling, but there was a determination, a longing Alice had never noticed before. "I've been planning this for a long time, Alice, since last month. Everything has been carefully calculated so I could take your place at the company, so you wouldn't be the only one who could work and seize every opportunity." These words hit Alice like sharp knives stabbing straight into her heart. She couldn't believe that Bella could do this, couldn't believe that the sister-in-law she had trusted for so many years could plot to kill her, undermine her career, all for greed. Alice felt a pain so deep it seemed to cut straight to her soul, a pain only betrayal could bring. She had loved Bella, had considered her a friend, a sister with whom she could share everything. But now, Bella was the one who had created this nightmare, the one trying to push her into darkness to claim something she never deserved. In those moments, Alice could only remain silent, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to respond. She couldn't understand why Bella would do this. Why would she use everything, even Alice's life, to achieve her goal? Bella's confession wasn't just a shock. It was a slap in the face to Alice's rational mind. She couldn't comprehend it, couldn't accept the truth that Bella had just revealed. The entire plan to poison her, to make her unable to attend the important upcoming meetings, had all been planned in advance. Alice suddenly realized that the food poisoning she had encountered before were not coincidences. They were part of Bella and Mark's conspiracy. They had calculated everything to put her in a position where she couldn't do anything, to seize the job and power she had worked so hard to build over the years. "I trusted you too much," Alice said. her voice choking, unable to continue. "You did all of this for what? For the company? For the opportunities you wanted to have?" That question wasn't just a surprise. It was a pain Alice couldn't put into words. Alice looked into Bella's eyes and saw a gaze devoid of remorse, without any hint of guilt. Bella didn't seem at all regretful, didn't show any sign that she truly felt wrong. On the contrary, she looked at Alice as if she were looking at someone she had just defeated. It wasn't a gaze of repentance, but of a conqueror. "I just want what I deserve," Bella replied, her voice emotionless, cold, and flat. "He'll never let you stand in the way, Alice. And now, I will take everything you've had." That statement was like a thorn piercing Alice's soul. Bella wasn't just taking her career opportunities. She was taking all the trust Alice had placed in her. In the blink of an eye, everything Alice had once trusted about her family and love was stolen, leaving a cold, painful emptiness in its place. Alice felt like she had been thrown into a deep hole with no way out. She couldn't imagine that her life could change so drastically just because of greed and lies. But the worst part was that she couldn't do anything to change it. She hadn't noticed the signs earlier, hadn't seen the missing pieces in her family life. She had trusted those closest to her too much. And now, she had to face the truth that they had conspired to destroy her. Even though the feeling of betrayal and hurt surged inside her like crashing waves, Alice knew she couldn't continue standing still in the pain. She couldn't let Bella and Mark continue to destroy her life. A new determination rose within Alice, an undeniable strength. She wouldn't let this betrayal end without consequences. No matter what, she would fight. Not only to protect herself, but also to reclaim what she had lost. The truth had been revealed, and now she had nothing left to lose except her dignity and justice. With all the evidence in hand, Alice began to realize that her life would never go back to what it was. She was no longer the happy wife, the close sister-in-law in the family. She was a warrior, and this truth would be the fuel for her fight for survival. Alice walked into the hospital room, each step heavy, but inside her, there was a determination she had never known before. The room was eerily silent. Only the steady beeping of machines and the tense glances exchanged between her, Mark, and Bella filled the space. For a long time, she no longer saw them as her loved ones. They were now the betrayers, the ones she had loved and trusted the most. But now, in this very room, all the truths about their conspiracy had been exposed, and she would not let them continue to ruin her life. Mark, the husband she once loved, stood silently in the corner of the room. He could not look Alice in the eye. His eyes, once filled with love, now only held confusion and fear. He knew it was over, that the truth had been revealed, and there were no words left to justify his actions. Bella, the sister-in-law Alice had once considered a close friend, now stood facing her, but in her eyes, there was no regret. Instead, there was a terrifying calmness, as if she had accepted what she had done and felt no guilt whatsoever. Alice looked at the two of them, a mixture of pain and anger filling her heart. She no longer loved Mark, nor did she want to share anything with him. Everything she had trusted, her husband's love and her sister-in-law's care, was now just lies and conspiracy. "What have you done to me?" Alice spoke, her voice no longer wavering as before. This time she stood tall, her gaze firm. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything we built. You and Bella planned this from the start, didn't you? To destroy me, to take everything I had." Mark said nothing, only lowered his head, not daring to meet Alice's gaze. He knew that no words could excuse his actions. Alice's words were like sharp daggers stabbing into his heart, and even if he wanted to, he couldn't say an apology that would heal the pain he had caused her. Alice did not wait for his answer. She had heard enough. Everything was crystal clear. But then, Alice turned to look at Bella, the one she had once considered a dear friend, a sister. All this time, Bella had been the sweet sister-in-law, always taking care of Alice in difficult moments, always the one Alice could rely on. But now, Alice realized it was all a facade, an act Bella had been playing for years. Alice looked into Bella's cold eyes, devoid of any remorse. "You want to take my job? You want to push me out of this life so you can replace me, Bella?" Alice said, her voice calm but filled with pain and fury. Bella's expression remained unchanged, her eyes still emotionless. "I only want what I deserve," Bella replied, her voice flat, without hesitation. "You have too much while I only have the scraps. I can't take it anymore, Alice. Don't you see? You can have everything, while I'm just the one standing outside looking in." Bella's response was like a slap to Alice. She couldn't believe the sister-in-law she had once loved could say such things, could face her with such a cold attitude. All the affection Alice had shown Bella now seemed like a game, a strategy to achieve her own goal. The entire room fell into silence. Alice felt as if she were standing against a wall, with no way out. Everything inside her felt broken, but somewhere deep inside, the strongest part of Alice began to rise. She could not let herself drown in this pain. She was tired of worrying, of being afraid. She no longer feared. Alice looked straight into Bella's eyes, then turned to look at Mark. "Did you think I would just sit still? That I wouldn't do anything to protect myself?" she said, her voice more determined than ever. "The truth has been revealed, and now justice will be served." At that moment, the police entered the room, their faces serious, as if they had been prepared for this moment. Alice didn't need to say anything more. All the evidence was already there. All the testimonies had been given. She had recorded everything on her phone. Bella and Mark couldn't deny anything. They had been caught red-handed, and now the truth would come to light. No more hiding, no more lies. Alice handed her phone to the police, where she had recorded all the messages, calls, and videos. Everything was proof of Mark and Bella's betrayal. She didn't feel happy or triumphant. She only felt relief. A part of her had been freed, not because she had defeated them, but because she had stood up for herself. She had not let her emotions control her. She hadn't allowed herself to be overwhelmed by the pain. And now, with everything exposed, Alice knew she would never let anyone, no matter how close, hurt her again. The police began to escort Mark and Bella out, and Alice stood there, watching them without a hint of emotion, except calmness. She didn't need their forgiveness, nor any explanation. She had stood up and done what was right. Alice felt the strength of her resolve, the justice that had been served. She was no longer the weak woman standing between two betrayers, but a winner, someone who had regained her dignity and faith in herself. Though the road ahead would still be long, Alice knew she would never give up. She would continue on her path, continue to fight for her survival, and protect everything she had built. She had learned that in life, nothing is easy, but only determination and courage can help people overcome any challenge. Justice will always prevail, and Alice would be the one leading the charge in this battle. She stood in the darkness of the night, with swirling thoughts in her head. Everything had changed. Her life had gone through a whirlwind, and now, after all of it, she felt as though she had just woken up from a long, vague sleep. The truth had been uncovered. Every scheme, every betrayal, all of it had come to light. She no longer had to live in worry, no longer had to endure the torment inside. Everything, no matter how painful, had been resolved. And in this moment, Alice realized that she had changed, become stronger than ever before. In the past, she was just an ordinary woman, living in love and the protection of her family. But now, Alice had become someone else, someone who knew how to stand up for herself, not only facing betrayal, but also finding the strength to fight against her own emotions. She no longer feared confronting the truth, even the harshest truths, even if they left wounds that might never heal. It was that truth that helped her find the path to move forward. Justice had been served, Mark and Bella could not escape the cruel actions they had caused. Everything had been resolved in a way that Alice could never have imagined. But she had not allowed herself to be defeated. She had stood firm, even in pain, even in exhaustion, and now she knew that she could continue to live a life worth living. She had overcome the dark schemes of her husband and sister-in-law, and that not only helped her regain her freedom, but also made her realize that anyone, no matter how strong they are, must face the truth if they want to live a truly free life. The challenging days had shaped Alice into a woman who was not only physically strong, but also mentally resilient. She had learned how to not only acknowledge her failures, but also find strength in them. Alice no longer feared facing suffering. She understood that only by confronting it could one grow, could one change, and continue on their path. She no longer hesitated when it came to making important decisions in her life. Alice was now someone who knew how to stand up and protect what she believed in, someone who knew how to love and respect herself. Alice was not only a victor in her battle with Mark and Bella. She was also a victor in her battle with her own emotions. She had not allowed fear, regret, or anger to control her. Every time she faced the storm within, she found a way to overcome it, not by avoiding it, but by embracing it and learning from it. She had learned how to forgive, not for those who betrayed her, but for herself, so she could continue to live in peace. She stood there in the gentle light of the morning, with all her determination in her heart. Everything had passed, and now Alice only had peace in her soul. She saw the light streaming through the window, the first rays of the new day. It was not just the light of a regular morning, but the light of renewal, of rebirth. She felt the tranquility within, a feeling she had never had before. She no longer had to worry about the past, no longer had to fear the unknown. She had learned to live in the present with all that she had, and that was the greatest lesson she had learned from life. Alice didn't need forgiveness from anyone, didn't need recognition from anyone. She only needed to know that she had done the right thing, that she had fought to protect herself, to protect what she loved. In her eyes, strength was not about never falling, but about always getting up after every fall. She had gotten up many times, and this time, she felt that she had achieved what she truly deserved. She no longer felt alone, no longer felt as though she had been left behind. Alice was no longer just a steady woman, but also a free, confident, and determined one. Alice's story, though painful, though difficult, had finally come to an end. And it wasn't an end, but a new beginning. The truth, no matter how harsh, is always what helps people move forward. That is the message Alice wanted to convey. Nothing is impossible to overcome when we face it head on, and strength is not a natural trait. It is a process of learning and growing from mistakes, from failures. Alice had gone through it all, and now she stood here, ready to step into a new life, where she would continue to be the master of her own destiny. She had learned how to trust in herself and the values she cherished. She had realized that no matter how difficult life gets, no matter how many challenges there are, as long as there is courage and determination, one will find their own path. Justice had been served, and Alice was not only a winner, but also someone who had learned how to live a life free from betrayal and lies. She had overcome the greatest storms in her life, and now she stood strong, not only with the strength of herself, but also with the confidence in the future ahead. With everything she had been through, Alice understood that it was her strength, her courage to face the truth, that had helped her move forward, and she would never forget this lesson. From now on, she would continue to live an authentic life, without regret, without fear, but only with confidence and belief in herself. After the storms of life, Alice finally found peace. She stood in the middle of a completely new world, where everything that once seemed like a pile of ruins, the shattered pieces of a life she once thought would never change, now lay before her. Her family, career, love, Everything had been destroyed by the betrayal she never saw coming. But after everything, when the light of truth had shone into the darkness, when all was laid bare, Alice found a serenity, a freedom she could never have imagined before. She no longer saw the shadows of betrayal following her, no longer heard the whispered secrets from those who had once been an important part of her life. She had not let the negative emotions cloud her vision, and that, for Alice, was the greatest victory. She did not need revenge. She did not need to make Mark and Bella pay for what they had done. What she needed, what she had found, was the peace of mind, the continuation of a life she could live fully, no longer controlled by the pain of the past. With each step on this new path, Alice felt as though she was being reborn. She no longer worried about those around her, no longer had to scrutinize their looks, no longer lived in fear of what might happen. Everything that had happened before, no matter how painful or uncomfortable, was now just a valuable lesson she had learned. The days of enduring the dark schemes of her husband and sister-in-law were now in the past. Alice had overcome them, and now she simply wanted to live a life of freedom, unbound by betrayal and suffering. Alice's story is not a story of revenge. She did not seek to retaliate against those who had harmed her. Instead, Alice chose to let go, not because she was weak, but because she knew that revenge would only deepen the wounds in her heart. She did not need to prove anything, did not need to do anything to make Mark and Bella pay. What she needed was tranquility, reconciliation with herself, and she had achieved that. Alice had learned the most important lesson of her life. Strength does not come from revenge or destroying the enemy, but from the ability to overcome pain, face the truth, and continue living a righteous life according to her conscience. That, truly, is the real victory. She had chosen not to let negative emotions control her, not to let revenge be her guide. She had chosen the path of forgiveness, not for those who had wronged her, but for herself, so she could live a life free of hatred. In every peaceful moment of her new life, Alice felt the freedom she had regained. She had not only overcome challenges, but also conquered herself, defeating the negative emotions, fears, and doubts within her. She had not allowed anyone, even the closest of people, to take away the peace in her soul. The dark days were now behind her, and Alice knew she was ready for a new chapter in her life. She had learned to trust in herself, in the power of resilience, and most importantly, she had learned how to live true to the values she believed in. Alice no longer felt lost in life, no longer had to seek forgiveness or recognition from anyone. She knew she could continue walking her path without fearing the ghosts of the past. The message Alice's story wants to convey to all of us is a powerful one. No matter how difficult life gets, no matter how painful the challenges we face, if we can stand up, face the truth, and not let negative emotions control us, we will always find a way forward. Revenge is not the final goal. The most important thing is to find peace, to live a righteous life, to live true to ourselves and the values we cherish. Alice had learned that even if everything falls apart, we can still rise and start over. She had not only won the battle against Mark and Bella, but also conquered herself. And in the end, Alice realized that life is not about what we lose, but about what we can create from what remains. She had created a new life, one no longer shadowed by betrayal, but full of hope and freedom.